We are happy that you're here with us on the topic of the future of higher education. And with this, and without much further ado, I would like to hand over to Senior Vice President Tong Hyun Kim.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to GEEF 2023, especially to this plenary session on the theme of future of higher education. Before we introduce our distinguished panelists, I want to say a few words about this topic. As you well know, the international community has long recognized education as an essential factor in development of social potential and sustainable growth. As Madame Michel mentioned, correctly pointed out yesterday morning through her keynote speech, societies that invest in education tend to be more prosperous. And we wholeheartedly agree with her. And as a result, we know that the outlook on higher education directly correlates with the prospects of future development. So for this reason, UN has identified its fourth sustainable growth goal as quality education, emphasizing inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. The COVID-19 pandemic certainly had an indelible impact on most of institutions of higher education worldwide. Universities were challenged to rethink and change many aspects of their operations in a very short period of time. And as we all know, rapid change in universities are unheard of and generally impossible during normal times. And yet, most universities, including Yonsei, responded to the challenge in flying colors. However, and very unfortunately, many of these measures adopted to cope with the pandemic may seem to have been quite innovative, and some even valuable enough to adopt permanently after the pandemic. But they actually did little to address the fundamental problems facing higher education. Today's universities are still being challenged to provide and design quality education that will prepare our students to be productive in a world that is filled with game-changing technologies and extreme uncertainties. And all this at a reasonable cost, so as to ease the student debt problem and also make quality education available for all. In short, universities need to step up to the game and become more of a serious player in the global sustainable growth. So, in alignment with this goal, today's session will focus on innovative approaches to education that promote sustainable and progress for global citizens and communities. Particularly, we will discuss how the collaboration of universities and education evaluation institutions contributes to the enhancement of higher education. Through these discussions, we seek to envision a role of higher education institutions in realizing a sustainable and inclusive future. And at this time, I would like to introduce our distinguished speakers and panelists. Our first speaker is Dr. An-shin Gi, professor in the Department of Medical Education, College of Medicine at Yonsei University. He is also the Executive Director of Yonsei Institute for Global Health. A big applause for Dr. An, please.
Thank you, Professor Kim.
Yes. Our second speaker is Mr. Duncan Ross, the Chief Data Officer for Times Higher Education. He oversees a team that generates university rankings, very important for all universities worldwide. In 2019, he launched the THE Impact Rankings, the first global university rankings that focuses on delivery of the UN SDGs. We are particularly interested in hearing how the impact rankings can help universities engage in SDG 4. Please, big round of applause for Mr. Ross. I'm also happy to introduce our two panelists. First, Dr. Maud Hamdi Abdzukur, Vice Chancellor of University of Malaya. Vice Chancellor Hamdi is a respected educator who holds several top leadership positions in field of higher education in Malaysia, and is also an active leader in many global university networks. A big round of applause. And next panelist joining us online is Professor Kwok In Wong, Vice President at Hong Kong Polytechnic University. He's joining us online. Dr. Wong is a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry of UK and is the Patrick S.C. Poon Endowed Professor at PolyU. A big applause for Dr. Wong. Dr. Wong.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to your comments later on. Let me first briefly acquaint you on how this session will progress. We'll first hear the presentations of our two speakers, perhaps 10 to 15 minutes each. Then we'll go for about 2 or 3 rounds of questions and comments and answers and so on with our speakers as well as our panelists. Then, without further delay, we'll begin our first presentation by Dr. An. Dr. An, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Kim, again. The topic given to me is to predict higher education within 15 minutes. It seems to me mission impossible. So I had to figure out a possible way to do this impossible mission. So I decided to talk about 3 points, 2 big changes and 1 unchanging nature. The first point is the change of knowledge ecosystem. It can be characterized by knowledge explosion, liberalization, and its volatility. We can say that we are living in the era of knowledge explosion. It can be explained with the simple but reliable index of knowledge doubling time proposed by Buckminster Fuller. Now it is estimated as 12 hours. Every 12 hours, knowledge is doubled. I'm a medical educator. Let's look at medical knowledge doubling time. In the 19th century, it was 150 years. But in 1950, it became 50 years. And in 2010, it was shortened to 1.5 years. And now it's 73 days. So when we consider this rapid growth of knowledge and its huge amount of knowledge, we need to acknowledge that we cannot deliver all the knowledge that our students need. Instead, we need to teach them how to search or research and analyze what they found and apply them to solve the problems. And I think you don't need to go to, let's say, Harvard University to take the classes and lectures from Harvard professors, because we have a lot of courses offered by prestigious universities and companies on alternative educational platforms, such as edX or Coursera or Learners at Yonsei University. The YouTube or Google platform also became a very powerful educational tool, including Wikipedia. So we can say that knowledge is no more confined within the boundary of university. So it is going over or across the border or boundary of universities. So we can say the knowledge, we can call it knowledge liberalization or knowledge democratization. And the third feature of the change is knowledge volatility. Knowledge volatility means the rate at which knowledge goes out of date. It can be explained with the concept of knowledge half-time proposed by Fritz Markloff, and also the change of most valued skill set of knowledge. You know, interestingly, the half-time of knowledge that you learn in primary school is longer than the universities. And the most high-tech knowledge is half-time is shortest. The more sophisticated knowledge, the more volatile. This phenomenon is very evident. So, you know what, our education is not about mere transmission of information, but a transformation of learners. So mere memorization is not no more a competency or the ability or talent of our learners. You can change you can see the change between within the 1 decade. There is a significant change in the valued skill set. I quoted this chart, one of the report of issued at World Economic Forum. You can see the competencies to think critically, to solve the problems, and the competency of self-management and working with other people and communication become more critical and essential competencies for the learners or the workers of these days. So considering this change of knowledge ecosystem, here I have my suggestion for the necessary transformation of universities to meet the future of higher education. The first is our education needs to move from transmission of information to the transformation of learners. It means we ought to rethink teaching and learning instructional design. And the nature of our education changed from a place-based education to platform-based education. It means a more active embodiment of digital technology into our education. And we need to transform the fixed and immutable our academic system into the more flexible and agile one. Let's think about the academic unit, academic year, semester, and a quarter, even courses. I think this system may be too heavy to catch up with the rapidly changing nature of current knowledge. So there is a concept, educational concept of education granule or the electronic badges. They are complete educational unit, but they are much smaller and very concise and compact. You can combine or you can gather this educational granules and educational badges to meet newer and changing educational need. Even we may require a redefinition of academic degrees. The second point is the change of mega environment. This change is huge and urgent and serious and at the same time very dangerous. In other words, our academia need to pay attention to the fact that our planet, the Earth, is at risk. What about COVID-19? For the last 4 years, we have been suffering from this infectious disease, but COVID-19 is not just a mere infectious disease, but an unprecedented epochal event. In the beginning period, 91% of registered students, number-wise, 1.6 billion students, they should be out of schools. I don't think there has been any time like this before throughout our whole human civilization. Now people, they are getting poorer and the climate is worsening. Yes, we have extreme heat, extreme drought and extreme flooding, as we Koreans also are facing. We have extremely cold weather caused by global warming, and the global warming is resulted from carbon emission problem. You know, the carbon emission problem or the need of deep decarbonization is not a claim anymore. It's a reality. So, you know, the doomsday scenario depicted by the movie, The Day After Tomorrow, I don't think it's a scientific fiction. It's rather, it's a prophesy or near future. So you can see the steep and steady increase of healthcare expenditure. The tendency is identical to every countries. So now Korea government is in trouble to deal this burden of the unbearable health cost in near future. In every year, at Davos Forum, there is a global risk report. The report indicates we human, we have many urgent, serious, and dangerous problems, but which seem not to have affordable solutions and answers. You may have heard this term, the term of VUCA, or times of VUCA. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It reflects well the uncertain and unstable feature of our days. But I think our educators, in spite of this reality, facing of unsolved challenges and the problems without answers, we have still an educational model unfit to VUCA reality. I mean, we tend to give questions that we know the right answers by asking them what is right. You know, the VUCA reality tells us it is time to rethink what kind of question that we need to give to our students. It is time to give questions yet to be solved. So in front of this huge and dangerous mega changes, I dare to say the academic community need to embrace problems without answers and the challenges unsolved with more courage. We need to rethink what to teach, and we need to connect real-world problems to our students at the educational context more and more. It means a more stronger connection of academia or university to the business sectors and communities. It means we need to rethink how to teach. You know, the reality that we are living with the problems without answers or challenges unsolved somehow tells us that the fact that our current system is not effective enough to solve the problem. Therefore, we need to reorganize our educational system. And the other aspect of this reality is we need to be ready to dismantle our traditional, departmental, siloed mentality and the attitude or approach or structure of our universities. So I want to say that we need to have a strategic mind to rethink who we are. So for this transformation, I think academicians or leaders of university, we need to have this practical wisdom, apophenia. Apophenia is a tendency to predict meaningful connections between unrelated things. As Steve Jobs told, creativity is about making connections between seemingly unrelated things and forming new concepts from the combinations. Even within a single person, the fact that creativity works with connectivity is a well-known fact. So, of course, there will be many gaps when you try to connect, but the gaps, the understanding of the gaps that requires unique or creative the solution only can be possible when we try to connect people, connect the labs, and connect the department in a creative ways. Lastly, I'd like to comment on the unchanging nature of human beings. Let me show a series of medical observations. First, the preterm baby who have regular daily skin-to-skin contact with their mothers, they showed better growth, stronger resistance to infection, and better outcome. So doctors call this the kangaroo mother care or kangaroo therapy. Contact, relationship is important. For the longevity, healthy, active, complex social integration or social connection is proven to be the strongest predictor for the longevity. On the other hand, loneliness is very dangerous. You know, loneliness itself as dangerous as having 15 cigarettes smoking in a day. So that's why UK and Japanese prime minister, they appointed the minister of loneliness. You know, the Korean society is known as the most lonely society among the OECD countries. So we need to deal with these serious problems. And about the better relationship of the cancer patient with their spouse is strongly correlated with the better survivor. And the highly empathic relationship with diabetic patient and the physicians, they showed less physical complication plus the psychological satisfactions. I mean, based on this series of medical observation, I can say that the human nature as a relational beings still remains unchanged. So this observation has an educational implication to explain why we still need to have a designated separate time and space for higher education. Let's look at the most valued skill set once again. You know, the teamwork, problem solving, the interpersonal skills and oral communication in 1999. In 2020, once again, teamwork, communication, and team approach, leadership, creativity. And 2025, it's also the same. You know, most of these valuable skills or competencies for the future can be formed through the team-based or community-based or relation-based learning. And we cannot replace them with mere technology. As I told you before, education is not about transmission of information. It's about transformation of learners. While our students, they have a transformation, they're going to experience deconstruction of their pre-existing identity and also reconstruction to form new professional identity. So for this transformation, they need to have a safe milieu, a community of practice, a kind of educational space as a molding cast, and they need to have a time for the process. In this way, I try to connect 3 different points for the prediction of future of higher education to create the future. I believe we need to prepare how to manage the change of knowledge ecosystem and embrace the unsolved challenges of the mega environment in a creative way. And we need to remember that we still need to have a time and space at university as a community of practice to nurture critical competencies of our students for the future. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Han, for your insightful presentation on the transformation of education in the area of VUCA. Yes, thank you. Next, Mr. Ross.
Thank you very much. I should start off by saying that I am not an educator. So I don't have to find solutions to how to do things. But what I want to focus on today is really that second element of Dr. Han's statement, the idea that there is this mega crisis that is befalling the world. And I want to go further than that and actually say it's not just that universities need to respond to that crisis. I believe that higher education has a vital role in leading the world to solve the crisis. But I'm going to start off with a statement which may seem quite odd, which is that all university rankings are wrong. Okay? It may seem strange for someone who's involved in creating rankings to say that, but this is something that's really important to remember. When we create university rankings, what we're trying to understand is these vast, complex organizations called universities. And universities are huge. So how many students do you have here at Yonsei?
35,000.
35,000 students. I mean, if you think about that in terms of comparing it to a company, that's a huge, huge organization. And those 35,000 students come in with different hopes and different aspirations. And then you have all of your academics and your teachers. And we mustn't forget all of the other people who work at the university as well. So a university is a vast organization. And here I am trying to distill that down to a single number. That number cannot possibly reflect the true breadth and excellence of an institution. And how we choose to define how we get to that number is really important. And on the screen here, we can see examples of 2 very different types of rankings. The World University Ranking is typical of what most university rankings are. They look at, global university rankings tend to look at research focus, because research focus is a lot easier to measure across the world than other aspects of university performance. And so there are a variety of rankings that try and do this. And if we went out onto the streets of Seoul and asked someone what are the top 10 universities in the world, but for safety's sake, let's walk about a kilometer away from Yonsei just to stop polluting the sample. If we asked what the top 10 universities were in the world, we would get a very similar list as if we asked that question in London or in New York or in Kuala Lumpur. We would get a very similar list because there is an expectation, and we expect to see Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge at the top there. But of course, research isn't the only thing that universities do. And so in 2019, at Times Higher Education, we decided that we needed to evaluate a very different aspect of what universities are and what they do. And in particular, we chose to evaluate universities against what we think they can do across all 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And that is the impact rankings. And they create a very different list of universities. Creates a list where the usual suspects don't necessarily do as well as they do when we look at pure research, because after all, why would we think that Harvard or Oxford or Cambridge are necessarily great when it comes to sustainability? Perhaps they are, but perhaps they aren't. But I'm very pleased to say that Yonsei University chose to participate in the impact rankings. And globally, out of just over 1,500 universities last year, they came in equal 27th place, with particular strengths in SDG 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. But if we're going to evaluate universities around contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals, we have a real challenge. I'm going to ask my audience here, put your hand up if you have read all 17 of the goals. We have two people there. 3, 4, excellent, bravely done those people, because the goals are very thorough. There are 17 goals, there are something like 100 and I've lost track, 170 odd targets, and there are 230 odd different measures within the goals. But they aren't designed for universities. They really aren't designed for universities. So when we looked at trying to evaluate what universities could do, we needed to create something called a theory of change, a way of understanding how we could go from the targets, well, from the goals first to the targets, and from the targets to what a university might do. And we think of the contributions that universities can make in 4 broad areas. Firstly, there is the research that universities do. That's clearly critically important. If you're researching into battery technology, for example, that is going to have a key role when it comes to SDG 7 and SDG 13. The second aspect is teaching. We need to ensure that everyone who leaves higher education does so with the skills to become part of the sustainable future, whatever their role may be in life. We also look at stewardship, how universities look after the resources with which they're entrusted, not just the physical resources, and I looked at the wonderful campus outside here. It's important that you look after that campus, that you minimize your greenhouse gas emissions. But it's also critical that you behave as a responsible employer, that you ensure that you are being fair to your students and to your broader community. And that broader community is the 4th part, how universities extend the work beyond their borders, beyond their walls, which is where universities are traditionally comfortable. You know, if you look around the senior common room, you'll see people who are feeling comfortable, having a good time, engaging in intellectual discussions. But we need to take that outside to the broader community, to all of Seoul, to all of Korea, to all of the world, and ensure that we are delivering that expertise and that knowledge, and also, very importantly, that we are listening to what other people are saying. And when we look at research around the SDGs, and this is a slide I have taken from Elsevier, they produce a bibliometric data set of research, we can see that not all SDGs are equal. The number 1 SDG in terms of the amount of research is, unsurprisingly, SDG 3, good health and well-being. It covers medicine. We'd expect significant research there. Disappointingly, at the bottom, we can see SDG 1, no poverty. And it's worrying to see that there is comparatively so little research that is going on to deal with this critical and vital area when we look at sustainability, because if we can't ensure that the poorest in the world are supported, then we will not achieve a sustainable Earth. And that the big arrow there indicates where SDG 4 sits, somewhere in the middle. So there is quite a bit of research into education, but possibly not as much as there might be. Universities are very good at looking at other people and not always very good at looking at themselves and their techniques. And when we ask universities to provide data for the impact rankings, we let them choose which SDGs they want to provide data for. With the exception of SDG 17, we ask everyone to supply data on partnerships for the goals. And again, we can see that the pattern is not even. We can see how the number of universities participating each year for the last 3 years has grown, by the way. That's what the bars indicate. But we can see that, yes, SDG 4 is the most popular SDG with universities, but actually SDG 3, good health and well-being, isn't far behind. Conversely, we can see that some SDGs are far less relevant, or as seen by universities as far less relevant to their particular goals. And sometimes that's because of geography. SDG 14, which is looking at life underwater, is obviously more relevant to universities that are on the coast than it is to universities that are deep inland. But one of the things we do ask universities in the impact rankings is about their commitment to education around sustainability. And there's some really positive news here. 93% of universities say that they have a commitment to meaningful education around sustainability. 87% have specific courses on sustainability, so for example, a master's on sustainability. And 90% of them engage, at least to some degree, in educating around the SDGs in the wider community. But we need to ask deeper questions. Simply saying you are committed to meaningful education doesn't tell me that you are necessarily being effective at delivering meaningful education. And so this year we have expanded those questions, and we have a hierarchy here of sustainability learning. The most basic level is that universities should be offering everyone optional courses on sustainability, so that if you're interested in the area, you can go out and you can have a well-designed, well-researched, thoughtful education around sustainability. But of course, students, your time is busy. You don't necessarily have time to make space for these optional courses. The next level on the hierarchy is making those courses mandatory, saying you must attend these courses. You must learn because it is critical to how you will act as a sustainable citizen in the future. But actually, the strongest way of teaching sustainability is integrating sustainability into people's coursework so that they can learn in the context of the subject they are studying what it means to be a sustainable citizen. So if you're an engineer, you need to understand what engineering and sustainability have in common. Where do engineers need to focus? If you're a physicist, your focus will be different. If you're a medic, your focus will be different. If you're in the arts and humanities, again, your focus will be different. But the learning is built into the way your courses are designed. And we look forward to seeing what the results of those questions are when we launch this year's ranking in May. So I'm going to leave with some quick thoughts on how universities can do more, particularly around SDG 4. Firstly, SDG 4 isn't really focused on university education. It has some aspects, but a lot of it is about early years and lifelong learning. Because when we know when we look around the globe that if we can't deliver great primary and early years learning, people will never get a chance to come to university. If you are fundamentally not taught those key skills that Dr. Anne mentioned at an early age, you will never gain them. Ensure that you're providing that pathway into education, that you are providing graduates who have the teaching skills necessary to work in that part of education. Critically as well, make sure that you are genuinely reaching out to people from across society, both people here in Korea, from all parts of society, but also people from other parts of the world, particularly students who are either refugees or displaced people or people from lower and middle income countries. And when it comes to lifelong learning, think about how you can provide appropriate vocational training and educational outreach into the community. And that can, of course, be through dedicated courses, but it can also be through public resources, some of those online resources that were mentioned earlier, but also through ensuring that you have events, that you make the university an outward-facing body, not just an inward-facing body. And then finally, we need to make sure that when we are measuring sustainability, when we are measuring our progress against the Sustainable Development Goals, we do this in a way that is equitable across the world. This is a map that just shows which countries participate or have universities that participate in the impact rankings. And I can see straight away, we can all see straight away from this, that there is a big gap in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is not just the case for the data we collect, it's the same for the data that UNESCO collates, the World Health Organization collates, and so on. We need to do more to support universities in sub-Saharan Africa and in other parts of the world where there are disparities of income to ensure that they can benefit from the work that great universities like Yonsei are doing. With that, thank you so much, and I'm pleased to hand back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Big applause. Thank you, Mr. Ross. I think the two presentations were extremely complementary in the sense that Dr. An's presentation was dealing with how universities should and should not change in the face of a very volatile and disruptive society. And Mr. Ross's presentation had to do more with how universities can really step up to the challenge of the SDGs and global development. Since we don't have a lot of time, I want to pose a very general, open-ended question to our two panelists in the order. We really want to hear from your experience on innovation of education that you have been engaging in. If possible, how that relates to the achievement of SDGs. And as well as reaching to the global society from your universities. So any of your experiences to add to this presentation will be greatly appreciated. First, Dr. Hamdi, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chairman. In the University of Malaya, we have been talking a lot about the SDGs. We in fact have the Center of the Sustainable Development, and the center focuses more on research and also reaching out for community. But coming back to education, a lot has been done, I believe, not only in University of Malaya, but also the rest of the universities which I've seen. My colleagues are all talking about the same subjects, SDGs, and implementing so many experience learning process for students to really obtain the elements of SDGs. We have done a lot, though. For example, the electives in University of Malaya, for example, is compulsory for the students to actually choose electives within the context of SDGs. We break it into 4 different categories, as shown just now, and the students will need compulsory for them to actually choose any of those subjects. They have to collect 9 to 12 credits, which is within the subjects list. And these subjects are all evolving around SDGs from 1 to 17. So these are important elements which we are trying to incorporate into the students' education. But what I wish to say is, more importantly, apart from education, transferring knowledge, which has been mentioned just now, transmission of information. I think more importantly, as mentioned, the transformation of the learners. And if we look at the way we conduct education, a lot of this transmission is still going on. Lecturers are still talking and occasionally opening up the floor for question and answer. You know, if 1 hour of lecture, maybe 45 minutes will be slides, presentations, and the rest is opening up for question and answer. And quite often, there are not many questions in some cases, you know, because of fear of the professors, maybe. So it depends on culture. What I'm trying to say is it has not changed for the past 100 years. It is the way we teach, and that's how it's going to continue. And therefore, Malaya is looking very seriously into different pedagogical aspects like flipped classroom, obviously blended learning, and push this agenda very fiercely, knowing that it is very crucial. But the third element which I wish to say is that apart from all these pedagogical elements and strategies, the issue that we often forget is really humanizing the education. What I'm trying to say, humanizing education, is that we have been, getting our graduates to really have lots of knowledge, full of skills, communication skills, creative solution, problem solving. These are all skills that they obtain throughout the whole process of education. But quite often we forget to really make them human, in the sense that they should have empathy, for example, in the sense that they should have, they should be looking at the poor and have the feeling of compassion, for example. And these are the elements which is extremely difficult to embrace or to embed into the students. And humanizing this education is really important for the SDG, because who actually basically destroy the world is the knowledgeable people. It is not the poor, it's not the unknowledgeable people. It's those with knowledge, the graduates, the engineers, the scientists, those who are being trained in universities. What they have done has really, to some extent, destroyed the climate, for example, have emission, carbon emission, and so on and so forth, without them realizing or knowing. So it is not the unknowledgeable people. So therefore, it is not the knowledge itself alone, but really humanizing the people and the graduate, which is extremely important. And sometimes in our educational system, that part is somewhat unseen or very, very vague in a way. We thought that by transferring knowledge or transmitting information, that is sufficient to build these humanizing elements in the students. So I think that's also another element which we in Yonsei Malaya is looking at very, very seriously, because eventually it is the human with a good heart that really can sustain the SDG. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamdi. Dr. Wong, thank you for waiting for quite a bit online. Your comments, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Okay, I think university plays a leading role in this sustainability development. Okay, we can incorporate this kind of element into our research and in our teaching. For example, in PolyU, among the 16 research institutes that we set up in the last 3 years, 5 are related to sustainability development. Okay, this includes research institutes on green energy, future food, aging, sustainable urban development, and carbon neutrality. We also can use the research, the outcome of the research or technology that we develop in our research and demonstrate inside our campus, as a kind of education purpose. For example, some of the energy saving technology that we develop, we use this technology in one of our new buildings. So that we can showcase to the public and to the student, the use of technology, in energy saving and to build a better, and greener environment. Of course, eventually, the government and the industry, we need the governments and the industry support, to sustain all of this kind of development. Because students need to find jobs and professors need to get research funding. I can give an example. One of my former students who did a PhD on green chemistry with me. Eventually now he is actually with the support of investors. He's setting up this the use of green technology. On lithium-ion batteries. He's now setting up this manufacture factories in Shanghai, in Xiamen, and also in Foshan in China. So eventually, this sustainable development, okay, eventually can get into, okay, the practice, okay, in the industry. For teaching, okay, PolyU actually incorporate the surface learning, okay, into our undergraduate curriculum as a mandatory subject since 2012. Okay, so students, okay, in this subject, okay, surface learning, students need to use the knowledge that they learn from their own discipline, okay, to serve the society, not only in Hong Kong, but also in overseas such as Rwanda and Cambodia. Okay, for example, we send a group of students, okay, engineering students, okay, mainly engineering students, but there are other students too, okay, from other disciplines too, okay, to go to Rwanda and help some of the places there in Rwanda to set up the solar cell panels, okay. So this is not only the training of the student, okay, on the social responsibility, okay, but also demonstrate, okay, how, okay, education eventually can contribute to sustainable development, okay. And we are now also expanding and exploring new sites around the world, okay, for this surface learning education. As Professor Anne just mentioned, okay, there's an explosion of knowledge, okay, and knowledge actually will become outdated, okay, and so teaching the student, okay, how to for lifelong learning and how to learn is also important. So starting last year, okay, PolyU, okay, make the incorporation of learn-to-learn elements into our curriculum mandatory. So every year, okay, we have a 4-year curriculum, first year, second year, third year, and fourth year. At least one subject, okay, in every year, okay, the teachers, okay, the program, okay, has to incorporate these learn-to-learn elements in that subject. Also has to teach the student, okay, how to learn by themselves, okay, and how to eventually can achieve, okay, the learning ability through the kind of lifelong kind of learning, okay. So thank you, okay, Chairman. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. I think our two panelists are mostly focused on teaching the students to be more aware of the Sustainable Development Goals and how they can relate what they learn with the SDGs and the global welfare. While I wanted to really hear more from all our panelists, we are really running out of time. We only have a few minutes. I did want to discuss the issue of how universities can collaborate with institutions of education and evaluations in furthering our education and transformation. So I would like to address my last question, unfortunately, to Mr. Ross on having administered the impact rankings for a few years. Where do you see this going? And especially, do you see a difference between Asian universities and Western universities?
So, firstly, in terms of do I see a difference? Absolutely. So one of the things that we did when we designed the ranking, we decided that we wanted to have an overall ranking as well as having individual rankings for each SDG. And we did that by saying you must supply data for SDG 17, Partnership for the Goals, because that idea of cooperation is vital in terms of sustainability. But then you could submit data for any 3 other SDGs, and we would combine those into an overall ranking. And intriguingly, one of the things we discovered is that the pattern of SDGs varied from university to university. But it did so in a really positive way. And when we look at the SDGs that are most popular in different parts of the world, we see very different things. So for example, in Korea, we see a strong commitment to SDG 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And that should come as no surprise to those of us who know Korean universities. Your links with industry are legendary across the world. But when we look at universities in India, for example, SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, is seen as much more important. And that reflects universities that are shaping the work they do to reflect the needs of the communities they serve. And that can only be a very positive thing. So absolutely, you know, we see those variations, and even within countries, obviously, we see variations. Different universities choose different things to focus on. That's a very, very healthy thing to see. But in terms of how we can work together with organizations, obviously, we have a commitment to sustainability and the SDGs. We run our own events that are focusing on those around the world. We've set up an advisory board to help inform our decisions about how we shape the ranking, because it's critical that we measure the right things. We could do a huge amount of damage if we measure the wrong things and encourage universities to focus on those things. And as part of that, I also sit on the United Nations Higher Education Sustainability Initiative, which sits as part of the High Level Policy Forum. Sorry, lots of acronyms when you're in UN world. And as part of that, we have looked at how rankings, ratings, and assessment agencies can better evaluate the work that universities do in this area. And we hope to share that work and do that in a way that it's not just about Times Higher Education, it's also about all of the other bodies who want to assess what universities are doing.
Wonderful. I think we have run out of time, unfortunately. Dr. An, would you have a comment?
Educational-wise, I have one additional comment. You show the chart of the different the evaluation level. So it's elective and the mandatory. So school policy to promote the SDG awareness and SDG education. For example, Yonsei University, we still have provide the educational courses for SDG, promote the interdisciplinary teamwork to our students. But what if we decide, in order to have a graduation meet the graduation requirement, you need to accomplish SDG project mandatory interdisciplinary mode, it will give a more deeper chance to understand about the SDG, and also we can break the siloed mentality. This is my specialty and this is SDG.
I think that's a brilliant point. The SDGs are not designed along the lines of a university. Universities are designed along the lines of a set of disciplines that were fundamentally created in the Enlightenment when we split the world into natural philosophy and philosophy, and then we subdivided natural philosophy into the sciences and so on. And that very hierarchical and rigid structure doesn't help us when we think about sustainability, because sustainability reaches across those boundaries. When we think of the impact that poverty has on all aspects of life, it doesn't link itself exclusively to health, it doesn't link itself exclusively to innovation, it covers everything. And so we need to think outside the academic box. We need to find ways of breaking down those barriers and being effective, because, and I will come back to this as my very final point, I promise you, Chairman, that it's not just that universities are important, it's that universities could be the transformational piece that we are missing in terms of driving the world towards a sustainable future. The skills, the unique role that universities play is critical. And if we can't, as a sector, grasp that and change who we are to be more effective, then the world is in a very dangerous place.
Thank you so much. The time light has turned red, so I think we should stop at this point. I would have liked to have heard much more from all of you, but I would have to say goodbye at this point. Dr. An, Mr. Ross, Dr. Hamdi, and Dr. Wong, thank you very much for your valuable time and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for this incredibly insightful panel and important. What is the future of higher education? Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back here in about a quarter of an hour, no, actually 20 minutes, so at 10:45. And I'm inviting you to be with us in the Centennial Hall again for Greening the Arctic, an exciting panel on greening the Arctic. Please come back. See you all soon.